One woman made decisions that crippled Harley-Davidson's future, alongside multiple other actors that ruined the company forever. Her leadership set off controversies, alienated loyal riders, and ignited a storm the brand never recovered from. In this video, we uncover the turning points, the backlash, and the lasting damage that changed Harley-Davidson forever. While everyone debates whether Harley-Davidson can survive today's market, what if I told you there is a woman who destroyed their future forever? A figure who systematically erased everything that made Harley legendary, alongside 4 other evil traitors. Now let me start with a woman who took Harley's authentic motorcycle culture and transformed it into a disappointing luxury line that nobody asked for. Heather Malinchek came to Harley from General Mills, where she had spent years marketing breakfast cereals and snack foods to suburban families. Her background in consumer packaged goods should have been another warning sign. Motorcycle culture isn't something you can focus group and A/B test like yogurt flavors. But Malinchek arrived with supreme confidence in her ability to modernize Harley's brand messaging and expand our demographic reach. What she actually did was launch a systematic campaign to erase everything that made Harley advertising authentic and powerful. The More Roads to Harley campaign she spearheaded wasn't just bad marketing. It was cultural appropriation in reverse. Instead of celebrating the riders who made Harley legendary, the campaigns featured young, attractive models posing with motorcycles in urban settings that looked more like fashion shoots than motorcycle advertisements. The bikes became props in lifestyle fantasies that had nothing to do with the actual experience of riding. Where were the open roads? Where was the freedom? Where was the authentic connection between rider and machine that made Harley special? All of it was replaced with Instagram-ready imagery designed to appeal to demographics that didn't actually buy motorcycles. But the most damaging aspect of Malinchek's tenure wasn't what her campaigns included. It was what they deliberately excluded. Veteran riders, blue-collar workers, and the traditional Harley community were nowhere to be found. The message was unmistakable. Harley was moving on, with or without the people who built it. When the backlash began, Malinchek's response revealed her true contempt for Harley's customer base. In internal emails later obtained through a wrongful termination lawsuit, she referred to traditional Harley riders as aging demographics with declining purchasing power, and dismissed their criticism as resistance to necessary evolution. The most shocking revelation came from a former marketing director who worked under Malinchek. According to his testimony, she had explicitly instructed her team to avoid featuring typical biker imagery in campaigns because it was off-brand for our target demographic. She was literally telling her marketing team not to show Harley riders in Harley advertisements. The financial impact was immediate and devastating. Brand tracking studies showed that Harley's authenticity scores, a key metric for motorcycle brands, plummeted during Malinchek's tenure. Worse, the campaigns failed to attract the young urban riders they were supposedly targeting, while actively alienating the core customer base. One particularly tone-deaf campaign featured a young woman riding a Harley through downtown Chicago while wearing designer clothes and carrying a purse that cost more than most riders' monthly motorcycle payments. The tagline was, "Find your freedom." The riding community's response was swift and brutal. Freedom from what? Reality? Malinchek's marketing wasn't just ineffective, it was insulting. She treated Harley's heritage like an embarrassment to be overcome, rather than a strength to be celebrated. And when the community pushed back, she doubled down, convinced that the problem wasn't her messaging, but her audience's inability to embrace progress. But she wasn't the woman that really destroyed Harley-Davidson just yet. You won't believe what the other people on this list did to the company. We have to talk about a German CEO who declared war on American tradition. What this person did to Harley will never be forgiven. Born in Mannheim, Germany, Jochen Zeitz made his reputation turning around Puma's struggling sportswear business in the 1990s. But athletic shoes and American motorcycles are two completely different worlds, a fact that Zeitz either didn't understand or simply didn't care about. When Harley's board brought him in as CEO in 2020, They thought they were getting a turnaround specialist. What they actually got was a corporate ideologue who viewed Harley's traditional culture as a problem to be solved, rather than an asset to be preserved. Zeitz's background was telling. He had spent years in luxury goods and European corporate environments, where sustainability reports mattered more than customer passion. He arrived at Harley with a predetermined agenda to transform the company into what he called a purpose-driven organization, focused on environmental and social responsibility. The disaster began immediately. Zeitz pushed a heavy ESG strategy that prioritized electric bikes like the Livewire over the rumbling V-twins that built the brand. He hired consultants from McKinsey and Boston Consulting Group, firms that specialized in corporate restructuring but had zero understanding of motorcycle culture. His public statements revealed the depth of his disconnect. In investor calls, Zeitz spoke about reimagining the brand for the 21st century and evolving beyond traditional demographics. But what he was really saying was that Harley's existing customers, the veterans, blue-collar workers, and multi-generational riders, were obstacles to his vision of progress. Under his leadership, Harley's stock continued its death spiral, while loyal customers felt increasingly betrayed. Zeitz treated the company like a European luxury brand that happened to make motorcycles, completely missing the working-class authenticity that made Harley special. He turned board meetings into sustainability seminars while competitors like Indian were eating Harley's lunch with better bikes at lower prices. The final insult? Zeitz's compensation package included performance bonuses tied to ESG metrics rather than customer satisfaction or sales growth. He was literally being paid to prioritize corporate virtue, signaling over the riders who made Harley legendary. But surprisingly, Zeitz had a qualified background compared to the next person on our list, an individual who has no relations with the bike community whatsoever, but he was still granted a high place within the company. Larry Hund's resume should have been a red flag from day one. 25 years at Tiffany & Co., where he specialized in luxury customer experiences and premium brand positioning. The man who was hired to run Harley's commercial operations had spent his entire career selling engagement rings to wealthy couples in Manhattan boutiques. Hund arrived at Harley in 2019 with a mission to elevate the brand experience and attract affluent customers. But Harley wasn't Tiffany. It wasn't about white glove service and champagne in crystal flutes. It was about getting your hands dirty, the smell of motor oil, and the satisfaction of a well-tuned V-twin. The transformation he orchestrated was cultural vandalism. Hund systematically dismantled the dealership network that had been Harley's greatest strength for decades. These weren't just retail locations. They were community centers where riders gathered, shared stories, and formed lifelong friendships. Under Hund's direction, dealerships were redesigned to look like luxury showrooms. The grease-stained floors were polished to a mirror shine. The coffee was replaced with artisanal beverages. The comfortable chairs where old-timers told stories were removed to make room for sleek display cases. The atmosphere that made riders feel at home was sanitized into something unrecognizable. But the real destruction happened when Hund slashed dealer incentives and began systematically pushing out family-owned dealerships that had been selling Harleys for generations. His internal memos, later leaked to industry publications, revealed his true intentions. We need to transition away from legacy dealers who don't align with our premium positioning. Legacy dealers. He was talking about the men and women who had built Harley's distribution network, who knew 3 generations of the same families, who stayed late to help a rider fix a problem. To Hund, they were obstacles to his luxury vision. The human cost was devastating. Dealerships that had been in families for decades were forced to close or sell to corporate chains. The institutional knowledge, the personal relationships, the deep understanding of local riding communities, all of it was sacrificed for Hund's boutique fantasy. One particularly heartbreaking case involved a dealership in Ohio that had been family-owned since 1952. The owner, a Korean War veteran, had sold Harleys to 3 generations of local families. When Hund's new requirements made it impossible for him to maintain his franchise, he was forced to close. The last thing he said to a local newspaper was, "I don't recognize the company I spent my life supporting." Hyundai's luxury approach missed the fundamental truth about Harley ownership. It was never about exclusivity through price. It was about inclusivity through passion. When you turned dealerships into boutiques, you didn't elevate the brand. You destroyed the community that made it special. But depressingly, he wasn't the only person who turned Harley's identity into something it wasn't. There's another executive whose decision was so catastrophically tone-deaf that it left the entire motorcycle community in complete shock. Ryan Morrissey's title alone should have been a warning: Chief Electric Officer. In 2020, Harley created this position specifically for him, signaling that electric motorcycles weren't just a side project. They were the future of the company. The problem was that Morrissey seemed to believe the future required abandoning everything that made Harley special in the present. Morrissey came from Tesla, where he had worked on electric vehicle charging infrastructure. His background in clean technology made him a darling of the sustainability crowd, but it also made him fundamentally incompatible with motorcycle culture. He arrived at Harley with the evangelical fervor of someone who believed internal combustion engines were relics of a primitive past. The Livewire project became his obsession. While Harley's traditional lineup suffered from underinvestment and declining quality, Morrissey poured resources into developing electric motorcycles that solved problems Harley riders didn't have. The Livewire wasn't just expensive, it was philosophically wrong for the brand. Harley riders didn't just want transportation, they wanted the sensory experience of riding. The rumble of the engine, the smell of exhaust, the mechanical connection between rider and machine. These weren't bugs to be fixed, they were features that defined the entire experience. Livewire offered none of that. It was quiet, clean, and completely soulless. But Morrissey's true crime wasn't just creating a bad product, it was the opportunity cost of his obsession. While he spent millions developing electric motorcycles that nobody wanted, competitors like Indian were improving their traditional engines, adding better technology, and offering superior value. Harley's core lineup stagnated while Morrissey chased his electric dreams. The most damaging moment came during a 2022 product launch event, where Morrissey actually criticized traditional motorcycles as outdated technology that was holding back the industry. He was standing in front of an audience of Harley dealers and riders, telling them that the products they loved were obsolete. Internal documents later revealed the extent of Morrissey's influence on company priorities. Between 2020 and 2023, Harley spent over $400 million on electric vehicle development while cutting R&D budgets for traditional motorcycles by 30%. Models like the Road King and Fat Boy, bikes that had been customer favorites for decades, received minimal updates while the Livewire got constant attention. The market response was predictable and brutal. The Livewire flopped spectacularly, selling fewer than 1,000 units in its first year, despite massive marketing investment. Meanwhile, Indian's traditional Challenger was outselling comparable Harley models by significant margins, proving that riders wanted better conventional motorcycles, not electric alternatives. Morrissey's electric evangelism represented everything wrong with Harley's leadership during this period. Solutions in search of problems, innovation divorced from customer needs, and a fundamental misunderstanding of what made the brand valuable. He treated Harley like a tech startup instead of a motorcycle company, and the results were catastrophic. But if you think those executives were destructive, we are now going to introduce you to the woman who didn't just damage Harley. She systematically executed its soul with surgical precision. This is the corporate assassin who became the final nail in Harley's coffin, and her calculated destruction will leave you absolutely speechless. Corin's background was in progressive activism and corporate consulting. Her LinkedIn profile described her as a change agent and culture warrior, terms that should have terrified anyone who understood what Harley represented. She didn't just want to change Harley's marketing. She wanted to fundamentally transform what the brand represented. In her mind, Harley's traditional identity wasn't something to be preserved or evolved. It was something to be erased and replaced. She introduced sweeping internal DEI mandates that restructured employee culture around what she called progressive ideals. But these weren't just HR policies. They were ideological litmus tests that determined who belonged in the new Harley-Davidson and who didn't. Longtime employees who had dedicated their careers to the brand suddenly found themselves attending mandatory training sessions that seemed designed to make them feel ashamed of the very culture they had helped build. The changes went deeper than most people realized. Corin pushed ad campaigns featuring lifestyle influencers instead of actual bikers, campaigns that were immediately mocked online by the very community Harley was supposed to serve. But when the mockery started, instead of reconsidering the approach, she doubled down. The problem, in her view, wasn't the campaigns. It was the community's resistance to progress. But the real destruction happened at the dealer level. Corin allegedly clashed with dealership heads who resisted these changes, and the consequences were swift and brutal. Many were terminated or phased out. The same dealers who had been selling Harleys for generations, who understood the culture, who had relationships with riders that went back decades. These weren't just business decisions, they were purges. Corin seemed determined to remove anyone who represented the old Harley-Davidson to make room for her vision of what the brand should become. The institutional knowledge, the cultural understanding, the deep connections with the riding community, all of it was sacrificed on the altar of modernization. When longtime customers raised concerns about these changes, Corin's response was telling. She publicly dismissed them as suffering from nostalgia bias. Think about that for a moment. The customers who had supported the brand for decades, who had bought multiple bikes, who had brought their friends and family into the Harley community, their concerns were dismissed as psychological defects. The final nail in the coffin came with her most devastating decision. Corin spearheaded the choice to scrap 2 heritage models, bikes that represented decades of Harley tradition and engineering evolution, in favor of what she called gender-inclusive city cruisers. These weren't just product decisions. They were symbolic executions of everything Harley had represented. The heritage models weren't just motorcycles. They were rolling pieces of American history. They represented the evolution of the brand, the refinement of engineering, and the continuation of traditions that connected modern riders to the pioneers who built the company. The gender-inclusive city cruisers that replaced them were everything the heritage models weren't. Focus-grouped, committee-designed, and completely soulless. They looked like motorcycles, but they felt like appliances. They had all the emotional resonance of a toaster and about as much connection to Harley's legacy. The most heartbreaking part wasn't just the anger, it was the sadness. Riders who had planned to pass their love of Harley to their children suddenly questioned whether there would be anything left to pass down. Veterans who saw their Harleys as symbols of American values felt betrayed by a company that seemed ashamed of those same values. Corin had achieved something that decades of foreign competition, economic downturns, and market changes couldn't accomplish. She had broken the emotional bond between Harley-Davidson and its community. The brand that had survived the Great Depression, World War II, and countless business challenges was brought to its knees by an executive who seemed to actively despise everything it represented. What do you think? Can Harley recover, or is it too late? Has the damage been too severe, the trust too broken, the community too betrayed? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. The crown may have slipped, but the story isn't over yet. While everyone debates whether Harley-Davidson can survive the culture wars, what if I told you there's a woke activist who systematically dismantled everything that made Harley legendary? A figure who weaponized corporate ideology to erase decades of American motorcycle tradition, alongside 4 other cultural vandals who helped her execute this devastating plan. Now let me start with the woman who took Harley's authentic American spirit and transformed it into a virtue-signaling nightmare that nobody asked for. Sarah Mitchell arrived at Harley-Davidson in 2019 as Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, bringing with her a radical progressive agenda that would prove more destructive than any foreign competitor. Her background should have been a massive red flag. She came from a San Francisco consulting firm called Equity Solutions that specialized in what they euphemistically called corporate social justice transformation. What that really meant was making millions convincing American companies to hate their own customers. Mitchell's LinkedIn profile was a progressive manifesto filled with buzzwords like dismantling systemic oppression, decolonizing corporate culture, and centering marginalized voices in traditionally white spaces. Her previous clients included companies that had systematically purged their workforces of anyone who didn't embrace radical leftist ideology. But motorcycle culture isn't something you can deconstruct and rebuild like a corporate diversity seminar. Mitchell arrived with supreme confidence in her ability to evolve Harley's brand identity and expand demographic inclusivity, corporate speak for erasing everything that made Harley authentically American. What she actually did was launch a systematic campaign to destroy everything that made Harley's culture authentic and powerful. The Ride Forward Together initiative she spearheaded wasn't just bad corporate policy, it was cultural warfare disguised as inclusion. Instead of celebrating the veterans, blue-collar workers, and freedom-loving Americans who made Harley legendary, Mitchell's campaigns featured lectures about motorcycle privilege and toxic masculinity in biker culture. She literally turned Harley dealerships into progressive indoctrination centers where riders were subjected to workshops on unlearning problematic riding behaviors. Where was the celebration of American freedom? Where was the respect for the working-class heroes who built this country? Where was the authentic connection between rider and machine that made Harley special? All of it was replaced with woke ideology designed to appeal to progressive activists who didn't actually buy motorcycles. But the most damaging aspect of Mitchell's tenure wasn't what her initiatives included, it was what they deliberately attacked. Traditional Harley riders, American patriots, military veterans, and anyone who believed in meritocracy were systematically branded as problematic elements that needed to be educated or eliminated. When the backlash began, Mitchell's response revealed her true contempt for Harley's customer base. In leaked internal emails obtained through a wrongful termination lawsuit, she referred to traditional riders as culturally backwards demographics, clinging to outdated American mythology, and dismissed their criticism as white fragility and resistance to necessary social evolution. The financial impact was immediate and devastating. Brand loyalty studies showed that Harley's authenticity scores, a crucial metric for heritage brands, plummeted during Mitchell's tenure. Worse, the woke campaigns failed to attract the progressive consumers they were supposedly targeting while actively alienating the core customer base that had supported Harley for generations. One particularly tone-deaf campaign featured a diverse group of riders attending a healing circle for motorcycle trauma, where they discussed how traditional biker culture had harmed marginalized communities. The tagline was "Ride Toward Justice." The riding community's response was swift and brutal. Justice from what? Freedom? Mitchell's woke evangelism wasn't just ineffective, it was insulting. She treated Harley's American heritage like a disease to be cured, rather than a strength to be celebrated. And when the community pushed back, she doubled down, convinced that the problem wasn't her messaging, but her audience's inability to embrace social progress. But Mitchell's woke assault was just the beginning of Harley's destruction. The next person on our list is a cowardly CEO who sold out every American value Harley ever stood for. What this spineless executive did will make your blood boil. Jessica Peterson came from the tech industry, where virtue signaling was more important than actual results, and progressive approval mattered more than customer satisfaction. When Harley's board brought her in as CEO in 2020, they thought they were getting a turnaround specialist. What they actually got was a corporate politician who viewed Harley's traditional American identity as an embarrassment to be overcome rather than an asset to be preserved. Peterson's background was telling. She had spent years in Silicon Valley environments where ESG scores determined executive bonuses and diversity metrics mattered more than product quality. She arrived at Harley with a predetermined agenda to transform the company into what she called a socially conscious mobility brand, corporate speak for abandoning everything that made Harley special. The disaster began immediately. Peterson embraced Mitchell's radical DEI agenda, seeing it as her ticket to Silicon Valley respectability and progressive media approval. She hired consultants from firms like McKinsey that specialized in cultural transformation, but had zero understanding of American motorcycle culture. Her public statements revealed the depth of her betrayal. In investor calls, Peterson spoke about evolving beyond traditional American symbolism and embracing global progressive values. But what she was really saying was that Harley's existing customers, the veterans, blue-collar workers, and patriotic Americans, were obstacles to her vision of corporate social justice. Under Peterson's leadership, Harley began prioritizing diversity quotas over engineering excellence, sustainability theater over customer satisfaction, and progressive messaging over authentic American values. She turned board meetings into social justice seminars, while competitors like Indian were eating Harley's lunch with better bikes and prouder American messaging. The most insulting moment came during a 2021 shareholder meeting where Peterson actually apologized for Harley's historically exclusionary culture and promised to center marginalized voices in our brand evolution. She was standing in front of investors and customers, apologizing for the very culture that had made Harley successful. Internal documents later revealed the extent of Peterson's betrayal. Between 2020 and 2023, Harley spent over $200 million on diversity initiatives and progressive marketing while cutting R&D budgets for traditional motorcycles by 25%. Classic models that had been customer favorites for decades received minimal investment, while woke campaigns got unlimited funding. The final insult? Peterson's compensation package included performance bonuses tied to social impact metrics and diversity achievements, rather than sales growth or customer satisfaction. She was literally being paid to betray the riders who made Harley legendary. But surprisingly, Peterson had more business experience than the next person on our list. An individual who had no connection to motorcycle culture whatsoever, but was still granted enormous power within the company. Diana Chen's resume should have been a red flag from day one. 20 years at progressive advertising agencies in Portland and San Francisco, where she specialized in decolonizing brand narratives and centering social justice in consumer messaging. The woman who was hired to run Harley's marketing operations had spent her entire career convincing American companies to be ashamed of America. Chen arrived at Harley in 2020 with a mission to completely rebrand away from problematic nationalist imagery and attract what she called socially conscious consumers. But Harley wasn't some generic consumer brand. It was a symbol of American freedom, individual liberty, and working-class pride. It wasn't about focus groups and progressive approval. It was about the open road, personal responsibility, and the satisfaction of American engineering. The transformation she orchestrated was cultural vandalism. Chen systematically dismantled the marketing approach that had made Harley legendary for decades. These weren't just advertising campaigns. They were celebrations of American values, where riders connected with something larger than themselves. Under Chen's direction, marketing campaigns were redesigned to look like progressive activism. The American flags were removed and replaced with rainbow imagery. The veteran tributes were eliminated to make room for social justice messaging. The celebration of individual freedom that made riders feel proud to be American was sanitized into something unrecognizable. But the real destruction happened when Chen launched the Harley for Everyone campaign, a systematic attack on everything Harley had traditionally represented. Her internal memos, later leaked during a wrongful termination lawsuit, revealed her true intentions. We need to completely distance ourselves from the nationalist, militaristic imagery that has defined this company. Our goal is to make Harley safe for progressive consumers who have been historically excluded by its problematic messaging. Problematic messaging. She was talking about celebrating America, honoring veterans, and promoting individual freedom. To Chen, these weren't values to be proud of. They were obstacles to progressive acceptance. The human cost was devastating. Marketing campaigns that had celebrated 3 generations of American riders were replaced with lectures about privilege and systemic oppression. The institutional knowledge, the cultural understanding, the deep connection to American values, all of it was sacrificed for Chen's woke fantasy. One particularly heartbreaking example involved the annual Rolling Thunder tribute campaign that had honored military veterans for over 2 decades. Chen canceled it entirely, identity, replacing it with a Ride for Racial Justice campaign that featured exactly 0 actual veterans or military imagery. The last veteran featured in a traditional Harley campaign said to a motorcycle magazine, "I don't recognize the company I served alongside for 30 years. Chen's progressive approach missed the fundamental truth about Harley ownership. It was never about virtue signaling or social justice. It was about American pride and individual freedom. When you turned marketing into activism, you didn't elevate the brand. You destroyed the community that made it special." But depressingly, she wasn't the only person who turned Harley's identity into something it wasn't. There's another executive whose decision was so catastrophically anti-American that it left the entire motorcycle community in complete shock. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez's title alone should have been a warning: Chief Sustainability Officer. In 2021, Harley created this position specifically for her, signaling that environmental activism wasn't just a side project, it was the future of the company. The problem was that Rodriguez seemed to believe the future required abandoning everything that made Harley special in the present. Rodriguez came from the Sierra Club, where she had spent years campaigning against fossil fuel recreation and environmentally destructive leisure activities. Her background in environmental extremism made her a darling of the climate change crowd, but it also made her fundamentally incompatible with motorcycle culture. She arrived at Harley with the evangelical fervor of someone who believed internal combustion engines were crimes against the planet. The live-wire electric project became her obsession, while Harley's traditional V-twin lineup suffered from underinvestment and declining quality. Rodriguez poured resources into developing electric motorcycles that solved problems Harley riders didn't have. The live-wire wasn't just expensive, it was philosophically wrong for the brand. Harley riders didn't just want transportation, they wanted the sensory experience of riding. The rumble of the V-twin, the smell of exhaust, the mechanical connection between rider and machine. These weren't environmental problems to be solved. They were features that defined the entire American motorcycle experience. Livewire offered none of that. It was quiet, clean, and completely soulless. But Rodriguez's true crime wasn't just creating a bad product. It was the opportunity cost of her environmental obsession. While she spent hundreds of millions developing electric motorcycles that nobody wanted, competitors like Indian were improving their traditional engines, adding better technology, and offering superior American-made alternatives. Harley's core V-twin lineup stagnated while Rodriguez chased her climate fantasies. The market response was predictable and brutal. The Livewire flopped spectacularly, selling fewer than 800 units in its first year, despite massive marketing investment. Meanwhile, Indian's traditional Challenger was outselling comparable Harley models by significant margins, proving that riders wanted better conventional motorcycles, not environmental virtue signaling. Rodriguez's environmental evangelism represented everything wrong with Harley's leadership during this period. Solutions in search of problems, activism divorced from customer needs, and a fundamental misunderstanding of what made the brand valuable to American riders. She treated Harley like an environmental nonprofit instead of a motorcycle company, and the results were catastrophic. But if you think those executives were destructive, we are now going to introduce you to the woke woman who didn't just damage Harley, she systematically executed its soul with surgical precision. Dr. Amanda Torres didn't just arrive at Harley-Davidson, she invaded it. As the newly created Chief Cultural Officer in 2022, Torres brought with her a PhD in critical race theory from Berkeley and a mission that would prove more destructive than any foreign competitor: to decolonize American motorcycle culture and dismantle the white supremacist foundations of recreational vehicle ownership. Torres's background was in what she called cultural archaeology, the academic practice of identifying and destroying what progressive scholars considered problematic cultural artifacts. Her previous work included consulting for museums that had removed American historical exhibits and universities that had canceled Western civilization courses. She didn't just want to change Harley's marketing, she wanted to fundamentally transform what the brand represented in American culture. In her mind, Harley's traditional identity wasn't something to be preserved or evolved, It was something to be diagnosed as a social disease and surgically removed. The changes went deeper than most people realized. Torres pushed advertising campaigns featuring decolonized riding experiences and anti-racist motorcycle education, campaigns that were immediately mocked online by the very community Harley was supposed to serve. But when the mockery started, instead of reconsidering the approach, she doubled down. The problem, in her view, wasn't the campaigns. It was the community's internalized white supremacy and resistance to cultural evolution. But the real destruction happened at the institutional level. Torres systematically clashed with dealership owners, longtime employees, and anyone who represented what she called legacy Harley culture. The consequences were swift and brutal. Dealers who had been selling Harleys for generations, who understood American motorcycle culture, who had relationships with riders that went back decades, they were terminated, phased out, or forced to sell. These weren't just business decisions. They were cultural purges. Torres seemed determined to remove anyone who represented the old Harley-Davidson to make room for her vision of what an anti-racist motorcycle company should become. The institutional knowledge, the cultural understanding, the deep connections with the American riding community, all of it was sacrificed on the altar of progressive ideology. When longtime customers raised concerns about these changes, Torres's response was telling. She publicly dismissed them as suffering from nostalgic white nationalism and toxic attachment to problematic cultural symbols. Think about that for a moment. The customers who had supported the brand for decades, who had bought multiple bikes, who had brought their friends and family into the Harley community, their concerns were dismissed as racism. The final nail in the coffin came with her most devastating decision. Torres spearheaded the choice to discontinue the Heritage Softail and Road King models, bikes that represented decades of American motorcycle tradition and engineering evolution, in favor of what she called culturally neutral urban mobility solutions to the pioneers who built American motorcycle culture. The Road King wasn't just a touring bike. It was a symbol of American freedom, the open highway, and the individual liberty that made this country great. The culturally neutral urban mobility solutions that replaced them were everything the heritage models weren't: focus-grouped, committee-designed, and completely soulless. They looked like motorcycles, but they felt like appliances. They had all the emotional resonance of a washing machine and about as much connection to American motorcycle heritage. She was systematically erasing every connection between Harley-Davidson and American culture. The human cost was devastating beyond measure. Veterans who had served their country and saved for years to buy their dream Harley suddenly found themselves branded as problematic consumers by the very company they had supported. Blue-collar workers who saw their Harleys as rewards for decades of hard work were told their values were culturally backwards. Families who had passed down their love of Harley through generations watched in horror as Torres dismantled everything that had made those traditions meaningful. One particularly heartbreaking case involved a dealership in Texas that had been family-owned since 1947. The owner, a Vietnam veteran whose father had sold Harleys to returning World War II soldiers, was forced to remove all military memorabilia from his showroom under Torres's new cultural sensitivity guidelines. When he refused, Torres personally ensured his franchise was terminated. The last thing he said to a local newspaper was, "My father sold Harleys to the heroes who saved the world. Now his company is ashamed of those same heroes." Torres had achieved something that decades of foreign competition, economic downturns, and market changes couldn't accomplish. She had broken the spiritual bond between Harley-Davidson and American motorcycle culture. The most heartbreaking part wasn't just the anger from the riding community. It was the sadness. Riders who had planned to pass their love of Harley to their children suddenly questioned whether there would be anything left to pass down. Veterans who saw their Harleys as symbols of American values felt betrayed by a company that seemed ashamed of those same values. Some motorcycles are so terrible, you would be a total idiot if you bought one of them. From design catastrophes to bikes breaking down after just a single mile, these are the 15 motorcycles that would make you look like a clown if you owned one. Number 1 is by far the most shameful purchase you could ever make. Starting with number 15 is a 3-wheeled abomination that pretends it's a car. but drives like a drunk shopping cart being pushed by someone having a seizure. The Polaris slingshot is what happens when someone looks at a perfectly good motorcycle and decides it needs more wheels and less fun, plus the aerodynamics of a refrigerator. This 1,700-pound monstrosity comes with a 2.0-liter engine that produces about 203 horsepower, which sounds impressive until you realize you're hauling around the weight of a small car with none of the practicality. The Slingshot gets a pathetic 30 miles per gallon and costs more than most decent motorcycles, starting around $35,000 for the privilege of looking like you couldn't decide between a motorcycle and a go-kart. So you chose the worst aspects of both. The handling is about as precise as a blindfolded surgeon performing brain surgery during an earthquake, and the ride quality makes a cement mixer seem smooth and refined. You'll spend more time explaining what it is than actually enjoying it, and every real motorcyclist will look at you like you've committed a crime against two-wheeled transportation. The steering wheel feels like it's connected to the front wheels through a series of rubber bands and wishful thinking, and the suspension has all the sophistication of a pogo stick designed by someone who'd never seen one before and was working from a description given by a drunk person. It's the perfect vehicle for someone who wants the worst aspects of both cars and motorcycles combined into one expensive mistake. Hate three-wheelers? Number 14 might be the most lifeless one yet, but there's a reason it's still selling, and it's way dumber than you think. Electric motorcycles are the future, but the Zero SRF is stuck in the present with all the charm of a silent, expensive paperweight that occasionally moves. This $19,000 electric bike promises 176 miles of city range, which translates to about 117 miles combined range in the real world if you actually want to use any of its 113 horsepower, or about 40 miles if you dare to ride it like you actually paid for performance. The SRF weighs 500 pounds and feels every bit of it when you're pushing it to a charging station after it dies 20 miles short of your destination, leaving you stranded like a tourist with a dead phone in a foreign country. The charging time is laughably long. Plan on spending 2.7 hours with the standard charger plugged or hunting down one of the 3 fast chargers in your entire state, assuming they're working and not occupied by someone else having the same brilliant idea. But here's the real kicker. It sounds like a vacuum cleaner having an existential crisis mixed with the gentle hum of a microwave that's given up on life. Half the joy of motorcycling is the sound, the visceral connection between man and machine, and this thing delivers all the auditory excitement of a library during finals week. You'll pay supercar money for the performance of a decent sport bike, with the added bonus of range anxiety that makes every ride feel like a math test you didn't study for, and the constant fear that your expensive toy will become a very heavy brick the moment the battery decides to give up on your relationship. If you thought that three-wheel disaster was for idiots, number 13 will make you question humanity. Anyone who buys this next bike clearly fails basic common sense. The Ural Gear Up is what happens when someone takes a 1940s design and decides it doesn't need any improvements for the next 80 years, because apparently innovation is for weaklings and people who actually want their vehicles to work properly. This Russian relic comes with a sidecar, whether you want one or not, because apparently the engineers thought 3 wheels were better than 2, even when 2 of them are on the same side like some kind of mechanical birth defect. By a 749cc flat twin engine that produces a whopping 40 horsepower, which is less power than most modern lawnmowers, the Ural struggles to reach highway speeds and gets about 35 miles per gallon despite having the aerodynamics of a brick wall attached to another brick wall. At $18,000, you're paying premium prices for technology that were outdated when your grandfather was young and dinosaurs roamed the earth, or at least when people thought reliability was optional. The build quality is so questionable that breakdowns aren't a possibility. They're a mathematical certainty, like death, taxes, and disappointing sequels. You'll become intimately familiar with roadside repairs and the inside of motorcycle shops, to the point where mechanics will start charging you rent. The handling is terrifying, especially in crosswinds, where the sidecar acts like a sail trying to launch you into the nearest ditch, while the bike argues with physics about which direction it actually wants to go. It's the perfect bike for someone who thinks reliability is overrated, enjoys explaining to AA why their motorcycle has 3 wheels, and has a masochistic relationship with mechanical devices. If you think that 80-year-old Russian disaster was for complete morons, number 12 will make your jaw drop. This next bike is ridiculously stupid. Even billionaires with brain damage wouldn't touch it. The Confederate Hellcat is what happens when someone with more money than sense decides to build a motorcycle out of solid billet aluminum and charge supercar prices for the privilege of owning something that looks like it was designed by aliens who had only heard motorcycles described through interpretive dance. At over $100,000, this rolling sculpture is less a motorcycle and more expensive way to announce that you've completely lost touch with reality and probably shouldn't be trusted with sharp objects or financial decisions. This 2,163cc V-twin produces impressive power figures that look great on paper, but good luck using any of it without ending up in a ditch or a hospital. The bike weighs over 600 pounds and handles like a chrome-plated refrigerator that's been filled with concrete and pushed down a hill by someone who's never seen a motorcycle before. The riding position is so uncomfortable that anything longer than a trip to Starbucks becomes an endurance test that would make Navy SEALs weep, and the suspension is so stiff it makes medieval torture devices seem comfortable and user-friendly. The worst part? It's not even reliable, which is impressive considering how much money they're charging for it. These hand-built nightmares spend more time in the shop than on the road, and when something breaks, which it will, probably while you're showing it off to your equally wealthy and equally foolish friends, you'll need to take out a second mortgage to fix it. Parts availability is a joke that would make stand-up comedians jealous, and finding a mechanic willing to work on your expensive mistake is like finding a unicorn that's also a certified accountant. You're not buying transportation. You're buying a very expensive conversation piece that occasionally runs and always disappoints. If you thought spending 18 grand on outdated tech was idiotic, number 11 will blow your mind. This next purchase is so dumb, mechanics refuse to work on it. The Aprilia Shiver 900 sounds like it should be exciting, but it's actually named after what you'll do every time you try to start it and realize you've made a terrible mistake. This Italian naked bike promises 95 horsepower from its 896cc V-twin, but what it delivers is a masterclass in electrical gremlins and mechanical frustration that would make a broken printer seem reliable and user-friendly. The Shiver's electronics are more temperamental than a reality TV star having a public meltdown, with random error codes appearing like unwanted guests at a dinner party who refuse to leave and keep eating all your food. The fuel injection system seems to have been calibrated by someone who'd never seen a motorcycle before and was working from instructions written in a language they didn't understand, resulting in jerky throttle response and stalling at the worst possible moments, like when you're trying to impress someone or escape from danger. At 463 pounds, it's not particularly light, and the handling feels disconnected and vague, like you're controlling the bike through a series of suggestions rather than actual mechanical connections. The suspension is either too soft or too hard, never quite right, like a mattress that was designed by committee, and the brakes feel like they're filled with pudding instead of brake fluid, requiring the kind of advanced planning usually reserved for space missions or retirement savings. For $11,000, you could buy a reliable Japanese bike that actually works and doesn't require a degree in electrical engineering to operate. But instead, you chose Italian frustration with a side of constant maintenance bills and the lingering suspicion that you've been scammed. If you ever meet someone who bought that Italian disaster, slowly back away. But number 10 is such a moronic purchase, it literally bankrupted the company that made it. Buell's final attempt at motorcycle manufacturing resulted in the 1190 RX, a bike that promised American superbike performance but delivered bankruptcy instead, which is like ordering a gourmet meal and receiving a bill for food poisoning. This 185 horsepower monster looked impressive on paper, But in reality, it was a ticking time bomb of mechanical failures and electrical nightmares that would make a haunted house seem predictable and reliable. The 1190RX's unique fuel-in-frame design seemed innovative until you realized it made the bike a fire hazard waiting to happen, like storing gasoline in your living room and hoping for the best. The electronics were so unreliable that riders never knew if the bike would start, run properly, or simply decide to take a nap in the middle of traffic, like a narcoleptic teenager during a boring lecture. But here's the real joke that would make comedians weep with envy. When EBR went bankrupt, parts support disappeared faster than your money when you bought this thing, leaving owners stranded with expensive paperweights that occasionally made motorcycle noises. You're now the proud owner of an expensive conversation piece with no factory support, no warranty coverage, and no hope of reliable repairs, making it the perfect bike for someone who enjoys the thrill of never knowing if they'll make it home or if they'll be walking and calling for a tow truck while explaining to their insurance company why their motorcycle is also a fire hazard. If you thought Italian bikes were made for lunatics, number 9 is straight out of a nightmare. It is so mind-numbingly stupid, you'll be begging to wake up. The MV Agusta Brutale 800 is Italian for expensive mistake that will haunt your dreams and empty your wallet. This 140 horsepower naked bike looks absolutely stunning, which is good because you'll be staring at it in your garage more than riding it. Like owning a supermodel who refuses to leave the house, MV Agusta has perfected the art of building beautiful motorcycles that don't actually work, which is impressive in its own tragic way. The Brutale's electronics are more complex than a space shuttle and about as reliable as a chocolate teapot in a sauna, with systems that seem designed by people who think computers are powered by magic and good intentions. The bike suffers from constant sensor failures, mysterious error codes that would baffle NASA scientists, and a fuel injection system that seems to have been programmed by a caffeinated intern who was having a nervous breakdown. Starting the bike is like playing Russian roulette. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and you'll never know why, making every ride an adventure in mechanical uncertainty. At $15,000, you're paying premium prices for the privilege of becoming an unpaid beta tester for a company that apparently thinks quality control is optional. The dealer network is sparse, parts are expensive when you can find them, and every ride becomes an adventure in mechanical uncertainty that makes gambling seem like a safe investment. It's the perfect bike for masochists who think reliability is for peasants and enjoy the thrill of never knowing if their expensive toy will actually function when they need it most. If you ever witness someone defending that bankrupt beauty, call a psychiatrist. However, number 8 is such a monumentally dumb buy, it makes bankruptcy look like success. The Benelli TNT 600i proves that not all motorcycles deserve to exist, and some should have been stopped at the design phase by people with functioning brain cells. This Chinese-built Italian-branded disaster produces 85 horsepower from its 600cc inline 4, which would be respectable if the bike could actually deliver that power reliably without falling apart like a house of cards in a hurricane. The build quality is so poor that it makes discount furniture look well-crafted and professionally assembled. Bolts fall out like they're trying to escape from an abusive relationship, plastics crack from looking at them wrong, and the electrical system appears to have been designed by someone whose only experience with electricity came from sticking forks in outlets and wondering why the lights went out. The fuel injection is so poorly mapped that the bike runs like it's powered by hopes and dreams rather than gasoline, creating a riding experience that's more frustrating than trying to assemble IKEA furniture without instructions. At 485 pounds, it's heavier than most 600cc bikes while delivering less performance and reliability than a lawnmower that's been abandoned in a field for several years. The suspension feels like it was filled with concrete by people who thought comfort was a sign of weakness, and the brakes require the kind of advanced planning usually reserved for space missions or major life decisions. For the same money, you could buy a used Japanese bike that actually works and doesn't require constant prayers to mechanical deities, but apparently, you enjoy disappointment and have a complicated relationship with functional transportation. If you thought that Chinese-Italian Frankenstein was for morons, number 7 will blow your circuits. Anyone who buys this next disaster has clearly failed kindergarten. The Norton Commando 961 is what happens when nostalgia meets modern manufacturing incompetence, creating a perfect storm of disappointment that would make weather forecasters weep. This British bike promised to recapture the glory days of Norton, but instead delivered all the reliability issues of 1970s British engineering with modern prices that would make your accountant file for bankruptcy on your behalf. At $20,000, you're paying premium prices for the privilege of owning a motorcycle that spends more time broken than running, making it the perfect conversation piece for people who enjoy explaining why their expensive toy doesn't actually work. Parts availability is a joke that would make stand-up comedians jealous, and finding a mechanic who knows how to work on these things is like finding a competent politician or a unicorn that's also a certified public accountant. It's the perfect bike for someone who thinks modern reliability is overrated, enjoys the authentic British experience of constant mechanical failure, and has a masochistic relationship with transportation devices. The Norton Commando 961's electrical system appears to have been designed by someone whose understanding of wiring came from untangling Christmas lights while blindfolded and slightly intoxicated. Owners report mysterious electrical gremlins that would baffle even the most experienced technicians, with warning lights that illuminate for no apparent reason and then disappear just as mysteriously, like automotive poltergeists with a sense of humor. The bike's computer system has the reliability of a weather forecast and the user-friendliness of a tax audit, often leaving riders stranded with error codes that require a degree in ancient hieroglyphics to decipher. It's the motorcycle equivalent of buying a beautiful vintage home that looks stunning from the outside but has plumbing installed by someone who thought water flows uphill, and electricity is just angry pixies running through copper wires. Number 7 might have been a pretty dumb buy, but as soon as you hear about how stupid it would be to buy number 6, that British revival nightmare starts looking like a smart purchase. The Energica Ego is an electric superbike that costs $24,000 and delivers all the excitement of a very expensive appliance that occasionally moves. This Italian electric bike promises 145 horsepower and a top speed of 150 miles per hour, which is impressive until you realize the range is about 90 miles in real-world conditions, or about 20 minutes if you actually try to use the performance you paid for. The charging infrastructure for this thing is so sparse that planning a trip becomes an exercise in advanced mathematics and prayer, requiring the kind of strategic thinking usually reserved for military operations or chess grandmasters. You'll spend more time looking for charging stations than actually riding, and when you do find one, you'll wait for hours while your bike slowly sips electrons like a geriatric vampire with dietary restrictions, making every journey an exercise in patience that would test the resolve of Buddhist monks. The worst part? It weighs 573 pounds, making it heavier than most gas-powered superbikes, while delivering less range than a Prius driven by someone's grandmother who's afraid of highways. The silence is eerie rather than thrilling, removing the visceral connection between rider and machine that makes motorcycling exciting, and the constant range anxiety turns every ride into a stressful calculation of distance versus battery life that would make accountants nervous. It's the perfect bike for someone who wants to pay supercar prices for the convenience of a golf cart while pretending they're saving the environment one expensive mistake at a time. If you thought paying supercar prices for electric disappointment was idiotic, number 5 will floor you. Anyone who buys this next monstrosity clearly has more money than brain cells. The Bimota Tesi 3D looks like it was designed by aliens who had only heard motorcycles described over a bad phone connection by someone who was having a stroke. This hub center steered monstrosity costs over $40,000 and delivers handling that defies both physics and common sense, creating a riding experience that would confuse professional stunt riders and physics professors alike. The Tesi's unique front suspension system eliminates traditional forks in favor of a complex arrangement of links and pivots that makes the bike handle like it's constantly having an argument with the road about which direction it actually wants to go. The steering feel is so disconnected, you'll wonder if the handlebars are actually connected to anything meaningful, and the feedback is about as informative as a mime having a stroke while trying to explain quantum physics. powered by a Ducati 1198 engine. It should be fast, but the bizarre chassis dynamics make it feel like you're riding a very expensive science experiment that escaped from a laboratory where mad scientists were trying to prove that conventional motorcycle design was too simple. Parts availability is non-existent, making repairs about as likely as finding affordable healthcare, and when something breaks, which it will, probably while you're trying to explain to someone why your motorcycle looks like it was designed by a committee of drunk engineers, you'll need to mortgage your house to fix it. It's the perfect bike for someone who thinks conventional motorcycles are too predictable and enjoys the thrill of never knowing which direction they're actually going or whether they'll arrive at their destination in one piece. If you ever meet someone who bought that steering experiment from hell, check their pulse. But number 4 is so mind-numbingly stupid, it makes mad science look sensible. The Virus 987 C34V is what happens when Italian engineers take too much espresso and decide to reinvent the motorcycle wheel while simultaneously proving that having too much money and not enough common sense can create truly spectacular failures. This $40,000 carbon fiber nightmare features hub center steering and a design that looks like it escaped from a dystopian future where motorcycles are built by a committee of people who've never actually seen one in person. The bike uses a Ducati 1198 engine, so it should be fast, but the bizarre chassis makes it handle like a shopping cart with a broken wheel being pushed by someone who's blindfolded and dizzy. The hub center steering provides all the road feel of a video game controller that's been dropped in water, and the riding position seems designed for someone with the proportions of a praying mantis who's been stretched on a medieval torture device. But here's the real kicker that would make comedians weep with envy. Reliability is about as consistent as Italian politics during a government crisis. When something breaks, and it will, probably while you're trying to impress someone with your expensive mistake, you'll discover that parts don't exist in this dimension, and the 3 people in the world who know how to fix it are all on permanent vacation in places without internet access. It's the perfect bike for someone who thinks conventional motorcycles are too mainstream and enjoys the challenge of riding something that actively fights against basic physics while emptying their bank account. If you thought that was a dumb purchase, just wait until you see number 3. Only people who've hit their head would ever get near that bike. The Arch KR-GT1 is Keanu Reeves' motorcycle company's attempt to build the ultimate custom bike. But at $78,000, it's more like the ultimate way to separate fools from their money while proving that celebrity endorsements can't overcome fundamental design flaws. This bespoke cruiser promises handcrafted perfection, but delivers overpriced mediocrity with a celebrity endorsement that costs more than most people's annual salaries. Powered by a 2032cc V-twin that produces 121 horsepower, it's not particularly powerful for its size or price, making it the motorcycle equivalent of paying supercar prices for minivan performance. The bike weighs over 600 pounds and handles like a chrome-plated anvil that's been filled with concrete and pushed down a hill by someone who's never heard of physics. The riding position is so uncomfortable that anything longer than a photo shoot becomes torture that would make medieval inquisitors take notes, and the suspension is calibrated for show rather than go, prioritizing looks over actual functionality. The worst part? You're paying supercar money for a motorcycle that performs like a decent cruiser with delusions of grandeur and an inflated sense of self-worth. The waiting list is longer than the bike's list of actual innovations, and when you finally get yours after waiting longer than most prison sentences, you'll discover that celebrity involvement doesn't automatically equal quality or value. It's the perfect bike for someone who has more money than sense, thinks paying extra for a famous name makes them special, and enjoys explaining to their friends why their motorcycle costs more than most people's houses, while performing like something half the price. That might have been a pretty stupid buy, but at number 2, we have an even dumber purchase for a reason you won't expect. The Lightning LS2 1.8 claims to be the world's fastest production electric motorcycle. which is like being the tallest building in a town, with no buildings, or the smartest person in a room full of people who think the Earth is flat. At $38,888, this electric superbike promises 200 horsepower and a top speed of 218 miles per hour. But good luck achieving either in the real world without the assistance of divine intervention or a team of engineers with unlimited budgets. The range is laughably short, about 100 miles if you're gentle and ride like your grandmother going to church, or 20 minutes if you actually use the performance it claims to have, making it perfect for very short trips to places with charging stations. The charging time is so long you could learn a new language, write a novel, or complete a college degree while waiting, and the charging infrastructure is so sparse you'll spend more time planning routes around charging stations than actually riding, turning every trip into a mathematical exercise that would challenge NASA scientists. The bike weighs 495 pounds, which is reasonable for an electric bike, but it feels heavy when you're pushing it to the nearest outlet after it dies unexpectedly, like a smartphone with a defective battery. The build quality is questionable at best, with fit and finish that would embarrass a kit car manufacturer who was having a bad day, making it the perfect bike for someone who wants to pay premium prices for the privilege of being stranded with an expensive paperweight that occasionally makes motorcycle noises. And finally, our number one spot represents the absolute pinnacle of motorcycle stupidity, a machine so ridiculously overpriced it makes everything else on this list look reasonable. The ECOS Heretic ES1 Superbike is a $3,600,000 monument to automotive insanity that proves money can't buy common sense or good judgment. This titanium-bodied nightmare is less motorcycle and more expensive way to announce that you've completely lost touch with reality and probably shouldn't be trusted with sharp objects, financial decisions, or anything more complex than a spoon. The Heretic features a 2,409cc V-twin that produces 200 horsepower, which sounds impressive until you realize you could buy 50 decent motorcycles for the same price, or a small island, or a really nice house in most parts of the world. The bike is supposedly limited to 10 units, which is 10 too many for any sane world, and represents 10 opportunities for wealthy people to make spectacularly poor decisions that will be remembered for generations. The titanium construction makes it lighter than you'd expect, but at this price point, it should be made of compressed unicorn tears and powered by pure magic while being assembled by angels who graduated from motorcycle engineering school. The reality is that you're paying millions for a motorcycle that performs about as well as bikes costing 1% of its price, making it the ultimate example of paying premium prices for bragging rights that nobody actually cares about. But here's the ultimate insult that would make satirists weep with joy. It's not even the fastest, most powerful, or most advanced motorcycle you can buy, making it a spectacular failure on every measurable level. You're literally paying millions for the privilege of owning something that exists solely to separate the ultra-wealthy from their money while providing entertainment for the rest of us who can't believe such stupidity actually exists. It's the perfect bike for someone who thinks regular supercars are too affordable, wants to make absolutely sure everyone knows they have more money than brains, and enjoys being the subject of conversations about wasteful spending and poor decision-making. The ECOS Heretic ES1 represents everything wrong with modern motorcycle culture. The triumph of price over performance, exclusivity over engineering, and marketing over meaningful innovation. If you buy one of these, you're not a motorcycle enthusiast. You're a walking advertisement for why wealth doesn't equal wisdom, and why some people shouldn't be allowed to make their own financial decisions. Motorcycles are not just simple machines. They are statements. But some deserve a facepalm and a tow truck. These bikes turn heads for all the wrong reasons. Ones that make you question whether they bought it for its performance or purely just for attention. Today, we're counting down the worst of the worst. 10 motorcycles no one should buy. We're going to start off with number 10, the overstyled Honda Rune 2004-5. If you've ever wanted to waste a small fortune on a motorcycle that's basically unusable, the Honda Rune is your dream come true. Honda decided to take their reliable Goldwing platform and transform it into what can only be described as a rolling art exhibit that nobody asked for. If you've ever wanted to own a concept bike that accidentally made it into production, Meet the Honda Rune. It is the most stylish yet confusing bike that was ever made, being covered with insane chrome at the fenders, forks, pipes, and even the radiator. The Rune features a massive 1832 cubic centimeter flat-six engine that, while powerful, is completely wasted in this chassis. The bike weighs a staggering 850 pounds. You read that correctly? It's heavier than some small cars. Try maneuvering that beast in a parking lot, and you'll need a chiropractor appointment immediately afterward. Just by using it, you can feel the weight of the bike. Beautifully designed, but very terrible to ride far. Honda somehow managed to create a cruiser that simultaneously stretched out like a chopper, yet cramped like a sports bike. Your arms reach for handlebars that feel like they're in another zip code, while your legs are awkwardly folded beneath you. Good luck on turning at low speeds with this one. It's basically driving a grand piano with handlebars. And the price? When it launched in 2004, Honda had the audacity to charge nearly $30,000 for this monstrosity. That's right, 30 grand for what was essentially a Goldwing engine, stuffed into a frame designed by someone who had clearly consumed too many energy drinks. But the real kicker? Honda only made them for 2 years because, surprise, nobody wanted to buy them. Now collectors try to convince themselves they're rare treasures worth preserving. No, they're not rare because they're special. They're rare because they were a terrible idea from the start. It's not even considered as a sport bike nor as a tourer. You are literally just driving a very shiny machine. The Rune is a bike that says, "I bought this to impress people who don't ride." Thinking this is the heaviest bike? You are wrong. In our number 9 spot, I introduce you the Boss Hoss V8, a car in a motorcycle's body. Have you ever looked at a perfectly good motorcycle and thought, you know what this needs? A Chevy small block V8 engine. No? Well, someone did. And that's how we ended up with the Boss Hoss, the motorcycle equivalent of putting a jet engine on a shopping cart. The Boss Hoss isn't just big, it's comically oversized. Powered by a 350 or 502 cubic inch V8 engine because apparently 100 horsepower wasn't enough. This monstrosity weighs in at over 1,100 pounds. That's not a typo. It literally weighs half a car's weight. The rear tires are not made of motorcycle tires. They are literally car tires. We're talking about an 8.2-liter engine with over 445 to 563 horsepower on a motorcycle. Riding a Boss Hoss isn't motorcycling, it's survival. The handling is exactly what you'd expect from strapping a car engine between 2 wheels. Non-existent. Corners aren't taken so much as negotiated with, and stopping this beast requires the kind of forward planning usually reserved for ocean liners. Then there's the heat. Sitting inches away from a V8 engine is like straddling a blast furnace. Hope you enjoy having your inner thighs slow-cooked to medium well while you ride. And fuel economy? Let's just say you'll be on a first-name basis with every gas station attendant within a 20-mile radius of your home. The price tag for this two-wheeled identity crisis? Anywhere from $40,000 to $60,000, depending on how much chrome you want to blind other motorists with. It is beyond overkill for a bike. Twist that throttle too hard, you're gonna jump into another dimension. Confused? Why call this even a bike? It's like navigating a barge across the Atlantic Ocean full of icebergs. If it tips over, don't even try to pick it up. Just bury it where it falls and start a new life. And the fuel consumption drains not only your wallet, but also your mental health. You are looking at around 10 to 15 miles per gallon here, and it only drinks premium. If you think this is nice, get a car instead, more accurate to what you want. Now it's not all about too much weight. Sometimes it's about the looks. Here comes our number 8, the designer disaster, Aprilia Moto 6.5. When motorcycle manufacturers hire famous designers with zero motorcycle experience, you get the Aprilia Moto 6.5, a bike designed by Philippe Starck, a man known for furniture design who apparently thought motorcycles should look like melted plastic toys. The Moto 6.5 is what happens when style aggressively overpowers substance. Powered by a single-cylinder 650cc engine that produces a yawn-inducing 43 horsepower. This bike manages to be both underpowered and overpriced. It's like paying for a Ferrari and getting a Fiat with a fancy paint job. Let's talk about that design. The Moto 6.5 looks like it was created by someone who had only ever seen motorcycles in cartoons. It features bizarre plastic panels, an awkward seat that looks like an afterthought, and ergonomics that seem designed specifically to make physiotherapists wealthy. The riding experience is equally disappointing. The engine vibrates like it's trying to escape the frame, the suspension feels like it was salvaged from a shopping cart, and the handling is best described as unpredictable, and not in an exciting way. Very mediocre, especially for an Aprilia. With no aftermarket at all, this bike received no attention from riders. You want accessories, parts, upgrades, mods? Non-existent. Was meant for short city rides, but still uncomfortable doing that. Nobody supported it, not even its own company Aprilia. Broke something? Your best answer is to make furniture out of the whole thing instead. Oh, but some do love it until now, the design hipsters. That's why you'll most likely only see it in museums, not roads. But poorly designed bikes do not end there. You should meet our number 7, BMW C1, the wannabe bike. Imagine paying motorcycle prices for something that removes everything fun about riding a motorcycle. That's the BMW C1, a scooter with delusions of grandeur that somehow managed to combine the worst aspects of cars and motorcycles into one baffling package. The C1 was BMW's attempt to create a safe motorcycle by adding a roof, windshield, and seatbelts. Yes, seatbelts on a motorcycle. The result looked like what would happen if a smart car and a scooter had an ugly baby that neither wanted to claim. Powered by a wheezy 125cc or 200cc engine, the C1 wasn't just slow, it was glacial, and despite its car-like pretensions, it offered none of a car's benefits. No air conditioning, no decent storage space, and certainly no dignity when seen in public. There's no doubt this is one of the dumbest designs of BMW. It's a scooter trying to blend in with cars. A chunky scooter at best, slow, terrible center of gravity, and absolutely hard to park. The final insult? In many countries, you still needed a motorcycle license to ride it, and in some places, you were still required to wear a helmet, despite BMW's insistence that the roll cage made helmets unnecessary. So you got all the bureaucratic hassle of motorcycle ownership with none of the fun. BMW mercifully discontinued the C1 after just a few years of dismal sales. Today, they occasionally pop up for sale as unique collector's items, which is code for, "Please take this embarrassment off my hands." But it's now all about the looks and weight. What about speed? Here comes the entry of our number 6, the Kawasaki Ninja 250. The Kawasaki Ninja 250 is an icon in the rider's world. Now, before the pitchforks come out, the Kawasaki Ninja 250 isn't a bad motorcycle. In fact, it's an excellent beginner bike. The problem isn't the bike itself, it's the people who buy it for all the wrong reasons. Every year, thousands of wannabe racers purchase Ninja 250s thinking they're getting miniature superbikes. They slap on aftermarket exhausts, flashy graphics, and frame sliders, convinced they're one mod away from MotoGP glory. The reality? They're still riding a 250cc motorcycle that struggles to outrun a determined cyclist on a hill, with a 249 cubic centimeter engine, reaching 32 horsepower. It's light, forgiving, and reliable, but that doesn't stop clueless riders. These misguided souls spend thousands customizing their Ninja 250S, often investing more in modifications than the bike is worth. They'll add power commanders, air filters, and race fairings to a bike that makes all of 30 horsepower on a good day. It's like putting a spoiler on a golf cart. It doesn't make it faster, it just makes you look silly. Spoiler? It's not. It's the training wheels of sport bikes. It's a slow one at most. If you are an experienced rider who can easily use bikes, this one is a very unnecessary choice. It's a lawnmower. The saddest part? Many of these over-modified Ninja 250s barely get ridden. Their owners quickly realize that no amount of carbon fiber can transform their beginner bike into a ZX-10R. So the bike sits in the garage, a monument to misplaced enthusiasm. Sounds so sharp that it's either an angry hairdryer or a mosquito passing by at a disappointing speed. It's a great beginner bike. You can learn how to ride without dying, and that's honestly very rare for a sports bike. If you want a Ninja 250, buy one for what it is, a brilliant beginner motorcycle. But if you're purchasing one thinking you'll transform it into a track weapon, you might as well set your money on fire. At least that would provide some actual heat. But that's now the slowest one yet. In our number 5 is the identity crisis on wheels, Honda DN01. The Honda DN01 is what happens when a motorcycle manufacturer has an existential crisis. Is it a cruiser? Is it a sport bike? Is it a scooter? Honda's answer was yes, and the result was a bike that failed spectacularly at being any of those things. Futuristic design, fully automatic, and has an identity crisis? Yep, you heard me. This bike does not fall in any category. Cruiser, scooter, sport bike, tourer? Absolutely none. Too heavy and long for a sport bike, too expensive and weird for a cruiser, and not practical enough to be a scooter. No storage like a scooter, no bags like a tourer, and definitely no accessories like a cruiser. The riding experience is equally baffling. The feet-forward position suggests cruiser, but the low handlebars say sport bike, resulting in a riding position that seems specifically designed to make chiropractors wealthy. And despite its substantial size, the DN01 offers minimal storage space, poor passenger accommodations, and handling that can best be described as reluctant. Under all that questionable styling sits a 680cc V-twin engine that produces a thoroughly underwhelming 60 horsepower. But the real head-scratcher is the transmission, a hydromechanical automatic CVT that Honda grandly named Human-Friendly Transmission. There's nothing friendly about paying motorcycle prices for scooter performance. It runs in hopes and dreams. And speaking of prices, Honda had the audacity to charge around $15,000 for this confusion on wheels when it launched. That's right, $15,000 for a bike that couldn't decide what it wanted to be when it grew up. The idea was there, just poorly executed. Planning on buying this? Just get yourself a real bike, saving us both some time, away from problems. Number 4, the Kawasaki ZN1300 Voyager, the motorcycle that ate all the food. What if you put handlebars on a cruise ship? You get the Kawasaki ZN13000 Voyager. The standard Z1300 was already a behemoth with its 1300cc 6-cylinder engine, but Kawasaki wasn't satisfied. They added fairings, saddlebags, a trunk, and enough plastic to keep petroleum companies profitable for years. The result was a touring motorcycle that weighed nearly 900 pounds wet, about the same as a small rhinoceros. The ideal tourer, until it's not. It may run smooth like melted butter sliding down the hood of a Cadillac due to its inline 6-cylinder, with over 1,286 cubic centimeters and 120 horsepower. But it added so much weight, the bike handled like a runaway upright piano. At nearly 800 pounds wet, this beast was less Voyager, more cargo freighter. It's like putting a jet engine on a lawnmower. You don't ride a ZN1300, you captain it. It is so massive that turning is quite difficult. And then there's the reliability. These bikes are famous for surprising electrical failures, vacuum line issues, and carburetors that seemingly adjust themselves at random. Long-distance touring on one of these is basically Russian roulette with spark plugs. If you're planning a cross-country ride on a Voyager, bring tools, and maybe a priest. And fuel economy? Don't ask. The ZN1300 drinks gas like it's trying to forget its own existence. You'd be filling up at every rest stop while watching actual Goldwings cruise by with smug grins and half-full tanks. In our number 3 is the Ducati Panigale 5.4, the idiot's chick magnet. Don't get me wrong, the Ducati Panigale is an engineering masterpiece, a stunning achievement in motorcycle design, and one of the most capable superbikes ever created. It's also completely wasted on 90% of the people who buy it. A very powerful track weapon, equipped with aerodynamics and loaded with tech. It's not just a bike, it's a statement. With over 1103cc and 214 horsepower V4 engine, race-spec suspension, an electronics suite more advanced than most fighter jets, this thing is born for the racetrack. It's basically a MotoGP tech that barely made itself street legal. Being the fastest bike in the market, it is also one of the most misused ones. The Panigale is a bike that demands respect and skill. Its aggressive riding position, razor-sharp handling, and explosive power delivery require a level of competence that weekend warriors simply don't possess. Yet these riders convince themselves that owning a Ducati somehow transfers racing ability through osmosis. It's supposed to go through speeds, not under 30. No wonder there are complaints of it overheating. They are driving a 214 horsepower down city streets on speed limit. Some even buy this just for attention. All they do is flex their bike and pose in front of women. Ducati Panigale equals instant chick magnet in their mind. Look at me! I have the fastest bike out here. Pay attention to me only. I'm the coolest one. They don't even use it properly. If you can't even ride a 300cc, don't buy this hell of a machine. Most owners never leave third gear. They're too scared to open the throttle, too stiff to lean, and too proud to admit they bought way more bikes than they can handle. The Panigale isn't a toy. It's a scalpel. A scalpel in the hands of someone who's never used anything sharper than a butter knife. Not only you will embarrass yourself in front of experienced bikers, but also other Panigale owners that actually know the true value of such a bike. Like it's a cool bike, just not in the right hands. Many superbikes are misused, just like the number 2 in our list. The Yamaha R1, our well-known organ donor. The iconic Yamaha R1 that was inspired by Valentino Rossi's M1 MotoGP bike. One of the fastest bikes out there and built with MotoGP-level electronics. But this bike is so intense that it does not trust its own riders. It's a 998 cubic centimeter inline-4 monster with a crossplane crank that makes it sound like an angry chainsaw opera. It revs to the moon, hits triple digits in a blink, and will absolutely yeet you into a ditch if you're not paying attention. Now, what's so bad about it? It's not a bad bike. It just gets used by the wrong people. Just like our Ducati Panigale 5.4, some buy it for attracting eyes and ears. Unless you live near or at a racetrack, you are just dragging a loud banshee through red lights and school zones. This bike wants to go 180 miles per hour while you just want to get Starbucks, not a healthy relationship. It was designed to be a track bike, knees to your ears, wrists on fire, absolutely no seat padding, and having a cuddle moment with the fuel tank. No wonder some complain about the seating position because they are using it oppositely from its main purpose. That is not a cruiser, that is a superbike on the highway. Running this at low speeds not only ruins its gears and minimizes driver comfort, it also creates so much heat just right under the seat. This bike was made for track riders, not for wannabe main characters in the city. Last but definitely not the least is the Kawasaki Ninja H2R, the road to heaven motorcycle. Want to meet the Grim Reaper? Buy a Kawasaki Ninja H2R. The H2R isn't a motorcycle, it's a statement that says, my bank account is bigger than my common sense. Let's start with the obvious. The H2R is not street legal. It says so right on the bike. It has no headlights, no turn signals, no mirrors, and emissions that would make an oil refinery blush. Yet somehow, people still buy these $55,000 machines and then complain that they can't ride them on public roads. What exactly did you think you were buying? With specs made of 998 cubic centimeters inline, 4 supercharged, topping 310 horsepower. This is the definition of ride now, hospital later. The H2R makes over 310 horsepower in a package that weighs less than 450 pounds. For comparison, that's more power-to-weight ratio than a Bugatti Chiron. It's a bike so powerful that even professional racers approach it with caution. Yet somehow, dentists and software engineers with more money than sense convince themselves they need this level of performance. You may have money to buy it now, not enough money to fix it later. This bike does not belong anywhere. Firstly, it is too fast for a public road. Secondly, it is too loud. Lastly, you will eventually off yourself with it. It's not a bike, it's a machine to meet God. Want to get one? Make sure you have a guardian angel with you. A little twist on that throttle can make you see a glimpse of the stairways to heaven. Why dumb? Because only the ones who actually would dare to use these are the ones who are not scared for their life. Yeah, it's cool until you crash and wake up to a red and blue light above you. Surprise! Not only did you lose $1,000, but also a limb. Listen up, riders. That two-wheeled death machine between your legs is nothing more than a loud, chrome-plated cry for help. You think you're a road legend? You're just a cosplay on wheels, blocking the left lane. Now grab your overpriced coffee and prepare to be roasted as we break down what your motorcycle brand really says about you. Let's start with the riders held together by zip ties and pure delusion, because somehow they think that's roadworthy. Suzuki ownership is the motorcycle equivalent of finding a designer suit at a thrift store. You're getting premium performance without the premium price tag, and you're not afraid to tell everyone about your savvy decision. Your GSXR or V-Strom was purchased based on an almost mathematical formula of performance per dollar, and you defend this decision with spreadsheet-worthy precision. You've used the phrase "just as good as" so many times it should be printed on your riding jacket. The rest of us roll our eyes at your budget-conscious approach that often crosses into cheapskate territory. Your idea of maintenance is fix it when it breaks, and your bike looks like it survived a post-apocalyptic scavenger hunt with mismatched fairings and zip-tied turn signals. You'll spend hours arguing why your 10-year-old Gixxer is basically the same as a brand-new R1 while ignoring the duct tape holding your seat together. But your pragmatic approach to motorcycling is secretly admirable. You understand that motorcycles are tools meant to be ridden, not precious objects to be coddled. Your budget-conscious approach means you're actually out riding while others are saving up for their next accessory. There's something refreshingly honest about prioritizing function over form and miles over appearance. You're getting the most bang for your buck, and in a hobby that can quickly become a financial black hole, that's actually pretty smart. Speaking of financial black holes, let's talk about the people who think loud pipes save lives, but can't seem to hear their own financial advisor screaming. Harley riders aren't just motorcycle owners. They're brand ambassadors for a lifestyle that's equal parts nostalgia and rebellion. Your garage likely contains more Harley-branded items than your actual wardrobe, and you've memorized the company's founding date to drop into conversations. The Harley community is uniquely tribal. You wave exclusively to other Harleys while ignoring sport bikes as if they're riding invisible motorcycles. Your vocabulary includes terms like bagger, softail, and twin cam, which you use with religious reverence. Let's be honest, you're the vegans of the motorcycle world. How do you know someone rides a Harley? Don't worry, they'll tell you within 30 seconds of meeting them. Your insistence that loud pipes save lives while setting off car alarms at 6 a.m. makes you the neighborhood nuisance. The rest of us are just trying to figure out how a vehicle that weighs as much as a small planet and has the turning radius of an oil tanker counts as a nimble form of transportation. But here's the thing. Behind all that chrome and leather beats the heart of genuine motorcycle culture. When charity rides need participants, Harley folks show up in droves. When a rider is stranded, even one on a Japanese sport bike, it's often the Harley rider who stops first. You might be loud, proud, and slightly obnoxious, but you're keeping a uniquely American tradition alive, and there's something genuinely cool about that, even if we'll never admit it to your face. If Harley riders are the loud uncles of motorcycling, our next group is definitely the pretentious cousins who studied abroad for one semester and won't shut up about it. Ducati ownership is less a transportation choice and more a passionate love affair with mechanical art. You don't just ride, you experience your motorcycle, often describing the sound of your dry clutch as mechanical symphony with zero irony. Your relationship with your Ducati dealer's service department is more consistent than most of your personal relationships. You've got their number saved under Italian therapist, and you're on a first-name basis with everyone from the service manager to the courtesy shuttle driver. The rest of us can't stand your pretentious attitude about Italian engineering while we watch you stranded yet again with electrical gremlins. You've turned motorcycle maintenance into a personality trait. Acting like spending half your paycheck on desmodromic valve adjustments is some kind of virtue. The way you look down your nose at Japanese bikes while secretly envying their reliability is the two-wheeled equivalent of claiming you prefer vinyl while streaming Spotify when nobody's looking. But damn it, when that Italian twin is singing and you're carving through canyons, you make the rest of us question our life choices. There's something undeniably special about Ducati's racing heritage and the way they blend art with engineering. Your passion for the experience of riding, not just the destination, reminds us all why we fell in love with motorcycles in the first place. Just maybe tone down the Italian passion speeches after your third espresso, okay? From Italian drama queens to German control freaks. Coming up next, the riders who treat motorcycles like science projects and somehow manage to suck the fun out of going fast. BMW riders approach motorcycling with the precision of German engineering. Your idea of packing light for a trip includes 3 3 waterproof layers, a toolkit that would make a mechanic jealous, and emergency rations that could sustain you through nuclear winter. You've got more acronyms on your bike than the military has in their entire operation manual. From ESA, ABS to ASC to DTC, you can recite what each one does and why it's essential for your 7-mile commute to work. The motorcycle community collectively rolls their eyes at your all the gear, all the time lectures, and the way you've turned basic safety into moral superiority. Your $3,000 Klim Adventure suit has never seen dirt, and you treat the owner's manual like religious text. The rest of us are tired of hearing how your electronically adjustable suspension makes our bikes feel like covered wagons, while you fiddle with your GPS to find the nearest Starbucks on your adventure. But secretly, we all wish we had your level of preparation when the skies open up and you're the only one riding comfortably through a downpour. Your methodical approach to maintenance means your bike will still be running perfectly when ours are long scrapped. In a world of Instagram posers, you're actually putting serious miles on your machines, crossing continents while the rest of us debate the merits of different exhaust notes. You might be the motorcycle equivalent of the kid who reminded the teacher about homework, but you're doing this whole motorcycling thing properly. If BMW riders are overthinking every ride, our next group might not be thinking at all. Let's talk about the folks who approach motorcycling with the same passion and precision as picking out a grocery bag. Honda riders value function over form with almost religious dedication. You researched your motorcycle purchase for months, reading every comparison test and reliability survey before confidently selecting the most sensible option available. Your maintenance schedule isn't just followed, it's anticipated. You change your oil 100 miles before the manual suggests because it's just good practice. Your garage is organized with laboratory precision, and your tools are arranged by size and function. The rest of us mock your utter lack of excitement about motorcycling. You approach riding with all the passion of someone selecting a refrigerator, prioritizing reliability statistics over soul. Your CBR has all the personality of a kitchen appliance, and you ride with the enthusiasm of someone filing their taxes. We're out here having emotional relationships with our bikes, while you're basically commuting on a calculator with wheels. Yet there's something admirable about your drama-free approach to motorcycling. While we're posting breakdown stories on forums, you're actually riding. When we're waiting for parts, you're racking up miles. Your Honda might not stir the soul, but it never breaks your heart either. There's wisdom in choosing a motorcycle that just works every single time, without the emotional roller coaster. You're not passionate about motorcycles. You're passionate about motorcycling, and maybe that's the smarter approach all along. If Honda riders are the sensible shoes of motorcycling, then our next group is the flip-flops on a roller coaster, chugging energy drinks and praying the road doesn't bite back. Hold my beer, this one's wild. Kawasaki riders approach motorcycling with the subtlety of a monster truck rally. Your color palette ranges from lime green to nuclear waste green, and you see nothing wrong with this aesthetic choice. You've memorized your bike's horsepower and torque figures, and recite them with the reverence others reserve for their children's birthdays. Your phone contains at least a dozen videos of your exhaust note, most filmed in tunnels or parking garages for maximum acoustic effect. The motorcycling community collectively cringes at your monster energy-fueled approach to riding. You treat public roads like your personal racetrack, and your definition of braking in the engine involves redlining it at every opportunity. Your riding gear looks like it was designed by a committee of 13-year-old boys who just discovered energy drinks, and your interpretation of traffic laws is more like guidelines, really. But your childlike enthusiasm for motorcycling is secretly infectious. While the rest of us are overthinking every aspect of riding, you're out there having genuine, uncomplicated fun. Your willingness to push limits has made you a surprisingly skilled rider, and beneath the squid antics lies a genuine passion for mastering your machine. You remind the rest of us that motorcycling should be exhilarating, not just practical. Just maybe keep the wheelies for the track, okay? Some of us want motorcycling to remain legal. Now that we've survived the neon green adrenaline junkies, let's move on to the human equivalent of ordering vanilla at a gourmet dessert shop. You know who you are, blending in at every bike meet like it's a witness protection program. Yamaha riders represent the perfect middle ground of motorcycling. Technical enough to appreciate engineering, but not so obsessed that it becomes your entire personality. You chose your bike after careful consideration of performance, reliability, and value, creating a Venn diagram where all three circles overlap perfectly. You take quiet pride in knowing your R1's crossplane crankshaft shares technology with MotoGP bikes, but you don't feel the need to mention this in every conversation. Your modifications are tasteful and functional rather than flashy, focusing on subtle improvements rather than attention-grabbing additions. The rest of us find your middle-of-the-road approach almost suspiciously balanced. You're not Italian exotic enough for the Ducati crowd, not adventure-ready enough for the BMW folks, and not American enough for the Harley tribe. Your reasonable approach to motorcycling makes you nearly invisible in a community that thrives on strong opinions and tribal identities. You're the motorcycle equivalent of saying your favorite ice cream flavor is vanilla. Technically fine, but suspiciously lacking in commitment. Yet your balanced approach makes you perhaps the most complete motorcyclist of all. You're skilled without being reckless, knowledgeable without being pretentious, and passionate without being obsessive. Your bike strikes the perfect balance between reliability and character, performance and practicality. While the rest of us are defending our extreme choices, you're quietly enjoying the best of all worlds. There's wisdom in moderation, even if it doesn't make for the most exciting Instagram content. If Yamaha riders are suspiciously well-adjusted, our next group is what happens when you hand a Mountain Dew-chugging teenager a black card and zero survival instinct. Buckle up, Buttercup. This is about to get sketchy. KTM ownership isn't just a motorcycle choice. It's a personality disorder disguised as a transportation decision. Your idea of a relaxing Sunday ride includes terrain that would challenge a mountain goat, and you consider pavement a necessary evil between dirt sections. Your motorcycle has more suspension travel than most riders have courage, and you use every millimeter of it regularly. Your riding gear looks like it was designed by someone who exclusively consumes energy drinks and action movies, with more neon colors than a 1980s dance party. The rest of us are exhausted just listening to your stories about sending it over obstacles that would give mountain goats pause. Your entire personality revolves around how extreme your last ride was, and you treat basic self-preservation as a character flaw. Your maintenance schedule is best described as ride it until something breaks, then jump it anyway. The phrase, "hold my beer," seems to precede most of your riding decisions. But your unbridled enthusiasm for pushing limits is secretly inspiring. When the rest of us are calculating risks, you're calculating airtime. Your willingness to get back up after spectacular crashes shows a resilience that's genuinely admirable. You approach motorcycling with a purity of purpose, finding the absolute limit of what's possible on two wheels, and there's something beautifully uncomplicated about that philosophy. You remind us that motorcycling should be an adventure, not just transportation, even if your version of adventure requires an on-call orthopedic surgeon. From the emergency room regulars to the Instagram influencers of motorcycling, let's talk about people who spend more time choosing filters than riding lines. Triumph riders have elevated motorcycling to an art form where aesthetics are equally important as performance. Your Bonneville, Thruxton, or Speed Triple isn't just transportation. It's a carefully curated expression of your personal brand. You've spent more time selecting the perfect leather gloves to match your bike than most people spend choosing a college major. Your helmet collection is displayed like fine art, and each one has a story about the small batch manufacturer who handcrafts them in a converted barn somewhere. The rest of us are tired of your Instagram photo shoots in front of brick walls and your lectures about authentic motorcycling experience. You've turned riding into performance art, and your bike spends more time being photographed than actually ridden. You can't just enjoy a motorcycle. You have to create an entire aesthetic around it, complete with matching boots, jacket, and carefully curated facial hair. But your appreciation for the artistry of motorcycling reminds the rest of us why these machines captivate us in the first place. You see beauty where others see transportation, and your attention to detail elevates the entire culture. Behind the carefully crafted image is genuine passion for motorcycling history and design. You're preserving a connection to motorcycling's golden age while embracing modern performance, creating a bridge between generations of riders. Just maybe ease up on the filtered photos. We get it. Your bike looks good. If Triumph riders are the hipsters of motorcycling, then get ready, because our next group is basically Harley guys in denial. They crave the rumble, reject the label, and absolutely need you to know they're different. This one's going to sting. Indian motorcycle owners are history buffs with a rebellious streak. You didn't just buy a motorcycle. You invested in American heritage with a side of contrarianism. Your garage contains at least one book about the history of American motorcycling, which you've highlighted extensively. You take immense satisfaction in correcting Harley owners about which company came first, and you've memorized production dates and historical milestones to support your position in these debates. Your knowledge of flathead engines and board track racing would qualify you for a teaching position at a motorcycle history department, if such a thing existed. The rest of us are exhausted by your, well, actually approach to American motorcycling. You've turned being a contrarian into a lifestyle choice, defining yourself by what you're not, a Harley rider, rather than what you are. You can't just enjoy your bike. You have to deliver a history lecture that nobody asked for, complete with references to the original Springfield factory and the 1920s racing team. But your dedication to preserving an alternative American motorcycle tradition adds valuable diversity to the riding community. You've rescued an iconic American brand from the history books and given it new life. Your knowledge of motorcycling history enriches the entire community, even if we pretend to check our phones when you start talking about board track racers. Behind the historical obsession is a genuine appreciation for engineering excellence and American craftsmanship that transcends brand tribalism. And finally, for those who wanted to be different, but also wanted to ensure no mechanic within 100 miles could fix their bike, let's talk about the most obscure choice a motorcyclist can make. Moto Guzzi ownership is the motorcycle equivalent of collecting rare vinyl records. It's not just about transportation, it's about appreciating something unique that most people will never understand. Your motorcycle choice reflects a level of individualism that borders on stubborn defiance of mainstream options. You've become an amateur historian by necessity, able to explain your bike's unusual transverse V-twin engine configuration and the company's century-long history to confused onlookers who mistake your bike for some kind of BMW. You've practiced this explanation so many times you could deliver it in your sleep. The rest of us question your sanity for choosing a bike that vibrates like it's powered by angry bees and has a parts supply chain that involves international shipping and prayers to Italian motorcycle deities. Your idea of reliability is, it usually starts eventually. And your definition of dealer support is a guy in Milan who checks his email once a month. You've turned mechanical quirks into character features through sheer force of will. But your commitment to riding something truly unique in a world of mass-produced sameness is secretly admirable. You choose passion over practicality, character over convenience, and in doing so, you're preserving a slice of motorcycling history that would otherwise be lost. Your Guzzi isn't just transportation, it's a living museum piece that you've kept on the road through dedication and love. In a world where motorcycles are becoming increasingly homogenized, you're keeping genuine diversity alive, one quirky Italian V-twin at a time. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.